All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to session 2 of workshops here at Beach Blitz 2019. This is focused on drive team and in-match strategy. We have some lovely people sitting right next to me that are ready to answer all your questions about drive team. I'll go ahead and let them introduce themselves.
My name is Saikaran Ramadan. I've been with Good Orange for the last five years.
My name is Braden King. I'm a mechanical design mentor with Team Taters, who I've been with for 10 years now.
I'm Jeremy Dramita. I was 5012's drive coach from 2014 to 2019, and prior to that, I was on Team 399.
Awesome. So what we're going to do here is we're going to have a lot of Q&A. I want to hear all your lovely questions that all these people can answer. And when you have a question, if you could just walk up to the rocket, I'll hand you the mic and you can ask your question. But I have a couple that are texted to me from lovely people in the crowd, like Aiden. And I'm going to read verbatim, so I hope you didn't write anything terrible. What? It's not great? All right. So one of the questions that I can read quickly in my head so I can ask you is, what do you use to review matches with your drive teams?
So I don't know if you can see up in the far corner there, we're recording every match for ourselves, and afterwards it gets put on a tablet. We get our drive team, drive coach, and maybe a human player off to the side and watch the match afterwards. Maybe at least once, maybe twice. Just see, okay, where did we make a mistake, particularly at this event? Where did we make a mistake? What did we do well? Watch our opponents. Maybe we play against them again, 33 or 9. How do we play against them well the next time? And then just figure out how to improve from there.
Do you do that directly after your match? You all like convene as a drive team?
Match,
okay.
yes.
Wonderful.
So one thing I'm really happy about that's been growing more and more in around First is that the First webcast unit is doing a really, really great job at uploading match videos that are high quality. So back in the day, you just see these red and blue blobs, and it's like, I think that's my robot. So really high quality match video streams really, really quickly after matches. I believe at AVR, we hopped off the field, and as soon as we got back to the pit, we started watching the match video. And just the faster that we can get to reviewing that video, the better the result of that review is.
We do something similar to the Taters, I think, but except we have a pretty, I don't know, this mic's weird, but we have, I think, a pretty dope system where we have this weird camcorder. I know, imagine a camcorder where everyone has smartphones, but it has a projector inbuilt to it, so we can like project it on like a white wall randomly. So if you see us at Champs, we'll be off in the corner by a practice field, just projecting our entire match, like large for our drive team to see, so they can just sit down, relax, and go over stuff. And I think it's helpful for people to sit down and see everything pretty big.
To what Jeremy said, absolutely. The sooner after a match that you can review, the better, because then the drivers can hold in their heads, I made this decision at this point, this decision at this point. You can go in and either question them or approve of them afterwards. And after 5-10 minutes, you're focused on the next one. You've pretty much forgotten what you did during that match. So where do I get one of these camcorders? It sounds kind of cool.
I'll send you a link on Amazon.
All right. Does anyone have questions in the crowd? If not, I'll read some texted questions.
Read my question.
Okay, I'll read Andrew Lawrence's question. Andrew asks, who does your match strategy with your alliance partners for each match? And what does your team do to work with your alliance partners each match to communicate the strategy and ensure they know what they need to do?
I'm going to start off just because we've changed it a bit, but if you all get a chance to work with Circuits, I think that they have the best version of this possible. Yeah, I think, oh wow, that's better. I think they have the best version of this possible, where they have a student go, who's well-versed in strategy, go talk to the team to figure out what they can do, give something preliminary, and then they work with scouting to figure all that out, I think. And then they go to the drive coach, and the drive coach discusses it in line, and I think that works really well.
So for us, we pre-strategize every match, generally the night before or if possible. If possible, the night before, depending on when the match schedules are released. And then prior to every match, after our previous review, we get our drive team and coach together with the drive team and coach of both of our partners and discuss the strategy of the next match there and just have a whole discussion about, we think you're capable of this, what has changed, did you break this, and use that to evolve and to build the strategy. strategy for the coming match. And we find that it's really helpful to get that buy-in early, because then they're able to, they buy in completely on it. And that's really important in having a effective alliance, is that everyone believes in what they're supposed to be doing and believes that it's the best thing for the team.
Can I ask a question? So how do you find that? I think it's just my area. I guess I'll go like this. So how often do you find that that predetermined strategy changes?
Unfortunately, quite often. I'd say it's the later in the season. So Houston, it was actually fairly consistent, because by that point, most of the robots, we kind of knew what they'd be capable of. We knew what we were capable of. Here, we've been having some difficulties. Other teams that have previously been fantastic have been having difficulties. And so it makes it a little harder. Some of our strategies change on the fly. And that's what's helpful about having that discussion early, is because then they can have that input of, by the way, our climber's broken, so we can't, we go, oh, okay, so here's how we change this match.
So to speak on how we prep for matches, typically we really appreciate events like Beach Blitz and Chessy Champs, who release match schedules well in advance. It allows our strategy teams and anyone interested to have a discussion on what our matches look like, and it's more of an open discussion on how we want to play matches, how what our win conditions are for playing each match to do well at the overall event. And as far as leading up to the match, we played with a couple of different configurations. One thing that I liked as a drive coach was when we had a match strategy group that would go out and reach out, because I'm more of, as a drive coach, I'm more of a technical, like micro R robot sort of drive coach. So having someone to deal with the whole match macro for me, and someone that I can bounce ideas off of, was really, really valuable. Shouts out to Javier right there.
Actually, the question that goes off of that, when you guys need to change your strategy mid-match, how do you actually communicate that to your alliance partners in the middle of the stress?
Lots of yelling.
Mid-match or immediately preceding a match?
Mid-match. Let's say an arm fell off and you need to change the strategy.
Lots
what do you
of
do?
yelling.
Given that I've never been a drive coach, I'm going to yield this to those who have been. Lots of yelling from those of us up there going, no, no, no. As one who's been on the sideline and thinking the strategy needs to change halfway through, lots of yelling is indeed the answer we go for. They don't allow, walkie-talkies and bullhorns, but yelling works all right.
I really like this question because I have an example specifically with Secron.
Oh no.
So I really think it's important that as a drive coach that you're keeping tabs on every robot in your alliance, just being really familiar with what each robot's supposed to do, what each robot's supposed to look like, and what the game plan is. And if you see something that's out of place or something that's kind of weird, it's simple enough to just ask a question, hop over your partner and ask a question. So as far as the example, 2018 Aerospace Valley quarterfinals, I peeked over at 3476 for some reason, and I noticed that their climber hook clipped off after they hit the scale the wrong way. So I ran over to Sakura and I asked, do we need to change plans? And it says yes. So we pivoted so that originally 3476 would climb, but mid-match, because I looked over and I touched base, we were able to establish that 5012 was climbing way earlier than endgame, so it was less of a last minute, hey, driver, you're climbing now.
I think something else useful about this is, on that example, right? I think I've definitely learned of figuring out this is a weird one. There are things on a robot that we know can break, and break more frequently than other robots. So a good example of this is our climber for 2019. Some stuff, happens to it, so we don't like really using it too much. But we always go through these with our alliance partners before the match, right? So let's just say, okay, we're going to go climb a little earlier. If something happens, we will let you know. And we go through these almost decision trees beforehand to try to alert people about these possibilities before even going into a match. And I think that really helps a lot because people aren't blindsided with these decisions. They know that they're a possibility and it's not a surprise.
To that point, I want to give 3309 some massive credit for in that last match. Really sorry about the broken arm, by the way. We had decided pretty early on to play, well, actually right at the end, to play defense for us against you as a result of the location of our robots on the field. And you guys played really well against our defense, and then you broke, and you immediately, and give you credit for this, switched your strategy to where you guys switched to play defense, and it was impressive. And it took us a good 5-10 seconds to realize what had happened, and then we had to make that same decision on the fly and go, oh, we don't have to defend them anymore, come back and now we play offense. And we put a couple pieces in and then went to climb. And that being ready for those kinds of changes is something that's really important, and we do it in practice. In our practices back home is just doing the same motion 100 times gets you really good at that motion. But then when defense gets in the way of that motion, or your arm breaks as a result of that motion, how do you change? How do you flip to the next action immediately? And practicing that ability to change actions, change targets on the fly, we found is really important to succeeding in a game with as much aggressive defense as the last couple of years it had.
So, sorry to keep on talking, but I think another team that does a really good job at that is Millennium Falcons. So actually this is interesting because I think they got better at it. So from Chelsea Champs to here, so I don't know if y'all were at Chelsea Champs or saw it, but they played defense all throughout limbs and won the as a defense spot of 254 and 971. So they got a lot of good experience playing defense there. And in our match against them, they got a hatch stuck in their robot, which I'm pretty sure they know, is something that could happen. And they immediately started nailing us, right? They called their other defense robot over, and they went. And it's that kind of, I think foresight and the ability to, I think practicing, doing those sort of changes.
Flexibility to change your strategy.
So something everyone remembers 1717 is kind of the OG Swerve Masters. I mean, they really were.
All that 118.
Yeah. So in 2012, we were right across from them in the pits at championships, and I talked to them, and they said they would actually practice disabling random encoders on their swerve drive and then making the drivers run through drills
I did not
with
know
broken encoders so that they could learn that skill, so that they weren't having to learn that skill on the fly. I don't think they ended up using it. I think the reason they got knocked out was lots of other communication issues that year. But they practiced that. Intentionally, you don't get to do this anymore. How do you play? Because I think 3309 said it really well. This is a game where the best robots are the ones that break last or play well with broken parts.
So we don't do the best part, Jeremy, for keep on, but actually this is a good example. We did something similar this year where we would practice in our field during season with our elevator disabled, right? So we would unplug those motors, and we had to figure out how to score with that, and I think that was really good practice for us. 1717 took it to a completely different level with the drivetrain, but yeah.
It's terrifying, honestly. Did you have anything to add? No? All right, are there any questions from the audience? Yes, you can come on down right to the rocket if you have a question. Yes. What's your question?
So what does the drive team selection process look like for each of your teams?
I heard an ah and an oof right when he said that.
Jeremy, how'd you figure out, y'all won World Championships 2015, right?
So, for me, when selecting drivers, I believe that raw skill should be at the bottom of the priority list. I think my top qualities for drivers are that they're easy to work with, are willing to be flexible, and are willing to put in the time and effort to get to know the robot, get to know the game, and how everything interacts. Because I've been thinking about this a lot lately, where FRC is a lot like a video game, where the better you are at knowing how everything interacts and how things mechanically behave, the better you're gonna be at it. So drivers who have that ability to adapt and gain those skills quickly in the really short time frames that we have in the season, I think those are gonna be really valuable. On top of other qualities, like they're easy to work with, like I said, they're flexible, they're respectable, they're going to be great representatives of the team. These are all super important. I think skill can be taught, but those other qualities you really need to bring to the table if you want to be on the drive team.
Something really interesting that I've noticed over my years, I was never a driver on our team. I was a gunner in 2013. We didn't make it to champs that year due to a lot of bad decisions, let's be fully honest. One thing I found with drivers is there's this, and I don't know if it's they've done more video games or done more driving simulators, the ability to drive towards yourself and know exactly where your robot's going to be while it's coming towards you is really, really hard. Much, much harder than driving away from you. And we found that some drivers have that ability, and then we look for that through drive-offs and drive drills, which don't, as Jeremy said, the season's really short. You can't do all that during the season. We kind of decide our driver ahead of the season, and then, again, Jeremy said a lot of the right things here. Easy to work with, flexible, and there's a fire. There's an intensity that you need to be a high-level driver of just, sorry, again, 3309, willing to just go beat up on the opponent, or take a beating. Take a beating and handle it well. I mean, and then the other thing is being able to handle problems with the bot and fight through it. I mean, no robot is going to be perfect straight out of the gate. Something is going to break, and being able to handle that break without breaking down yourself it's amazing what some students are able to do there. And we found that really critical as a driving student.
On that subject of having the driver drive towards themselves, so we've heard from a couple of teams of 197 a couple of times that driving in figure eights is the easiest way of telling if a driver can use the controls well. And it's something crazy because we've seen kids drive the robot pretty well, and you ask them to do a figure eight and they can't. And then there are kids where it's just something that they understand. Okay, you have to turn the whatever to get that curve, go straight on this part, and then do that again. And I think that's a super simple and easy way that everyone here can, or a drill that people here can all use to figure out who might be a really good driver.
I'm going to add something onto that. Absolutely. Figure eight drills are astoundingly simple to get. But figure eights, and then halfway through their figure eight, when they're not expecting it, tell them to drive the figure eight backwards. And then while they're driving it backwards for a while, tell them to drive it forwards again, and just watch
Second change really gets that
and
right.
switch
And
back and
flip
forth
the
over.
robots too.
Yeah, and rotate around, drive the figure eight the other way. That ability to adapt on the fly is, I never had it. And we have seen a lot of students over the years that have it, and it's pretty cool, and it's really critical to be able to drive well.
On that note, not every driver is going to be equally as good with every control scheme. So maybe the one that you're testing your driver on isn't the most ideal for them. So maybe figure out, like I said, if they play any video games, if there are any parallels you can draw from there. So I talked about this last year, but our main driver, he's going on his 4th year now, over 100 matches, and he's really, really good because he carried over the Forza control scheme from the video game, where one trigger is forward throttle, the other trigger is reverse throttle, and there's a stick for turning. And he's a pretty good driver with the other control schemes, but as soon as we brought that one over into FRC, we really feel like he popped off. So that's really an opportunity to look at your how you're setting up driver skills test. I know I said that skills can be taught, but maybe there's a certain path that you could take where a given driver is a little further ahead. So if your driver with the best qualities is a little behind on standard tank drive, maybe try the other ones available to you.
Question that kind of leads into that is someone from the audience just asked, how do you prevent your drivers from taking too much ownership of a play that lost the match overall?
FRC is a team sport. And anything that breaks, there are things that are on one driver. A driver hits the wrong button. They accidentally drop the picker when they should have dropped the other picker, or went to the wrong height. That happens. But a lot of the things that break down are something breaks, and it's not on that driver. Or if it is, it's that driver ran into something and it broke, and it's, well, really, we could have designed it more stronger. It's not all on that person. And in a team sport, it's all about recovery and going in and saying, okay, you made this mistake. Yeah, you made the mistake. How do you not make it next time?
I think it's all about culture and just having, and have everyone be understanding and explain things and be calm about things. And it's okay if you lose a match. It's okay if you it's okay. It's okay. I think that's how we deal with it.
One thing that I really love about 5012 is that we're really lighthearted about everything that happens with the robot. the famous moment from 2017, our bumpers unclipped themselves, unwrapped them from the entire robot. We called that snack, and that was hilarious. Probably one of my favorite moments of past couple of years. But it's just really important to realize that while bad things may happen on the field, it might be a human mistake. Like what was already said, you really have to identify why that mistake was made and how you can avoid making the same mistake in the future. And if your whole team culture is really supportive of these silly, funny, hilarious, memeable moments that could happen with your robot, I think that's another big step. And it's kind of a weird thing, but it's how it rolls.
Awesome. Any questions from the audience before I take? I know I have a bunch of texts. Yes, come on up. Go ahead. Yes.
So just before that, we always love moments when our robot like completely falls apart in the field, just like the snack. Like LA this year, our turret spun around like 5-6 times. It completely
All
destroyed
the
everything.
degrees of freedom,
And
all of them.
We find that hilarious. I guess take everything lightly.
Okay. I had a question on how you guys figure out your pick list for alliance selections.
I guess drive teams role in that, or how we just do it in general.
Any information at all?
Data. I mean, collect every piece of information you can. One thing I've found is there's a bunch of teams in the PNW that are great about putting out data. Skunkworks put out tons of data. CPR 3663, they throw out tons of data. If you're at events with them, take advantage of that. If you don't have a scouting team that's large enough or developed enough to take that data for yourself, get it from everybody you can. Find the more experienced teams there, get that data from them, and then look at it and go, what do we need to win? And it's really dependent on where you're ranked. If you're ranked, 1, it's pretty easy. You go, okay, who's the second best bot available for the first pick? On the second pick, I'm sure these other teams can vouch, it's really hard on that second pick. And it's really hard on the first pick too sometimes. If everyone doesn't know, at Houston this year, we had a choice. We ranked first and had a choice down to Code Orange or Bare Metal. And I can honestly say that was one of the longest discussions I have ever seen our team have on a pick list.
I think we're about to answer at like 11:30 that night, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. We tried to decide it at first, and when we can't make this decision, chose our second pick, made our second pick list, and then went back to that decision because we weren't ready first. But it's all about the data. It's about looking at what do you need. What? Oh. It's all about what do you need to win? How do you look? What's available? So in this game, it's like, say you're a robot that can only do cargo, and you're ranked really high. Well, you don't want to pick another really good cargo bot because then you're going to fill up the cargo ship right away and have nothing to play. So you find someone who can create spaces for you to score and rank them based on that. And that combining of the various game pieces, how they work together is really important for this year.
So to speak on the drive team specific role in forming a pick list, so as far as being the drive team that you want to create that is an ideal pick, it's really important that your drive team is, and a lot of these qualities are similar to my driver qualities from earlier, where they're easy to work with, they're adaptable, they're flexible, and they bring something to the table. And I think it's really important for a drive team to show that to potential alliance captains, but also on the other side of that, as the team forming the pick list, I think it's really important that the drive team is respectful to other teams, but also if there are any weird incidents that I'm not saying here go out and put every team on a do not pick list, but there are some situations where the drive team might need to identify, okay, we cannot work with this team, we've tried, and we need to figure out a different pick or figure out a way around that, because that behind the glass dynamic is super important, and to overlook that in favor of numbers could be an issue.
So actually, on that note, so scouting on our team at least has total say over our pick list and our picks. But what can really be a good tiebreaker and actually help sway bring a team like way higher is our interactions with them, and if we liked working with them, and if they were receptive, and I mean if it's fun, it's just fun.
And that really matters a lot when it comes to like the tiebreakers, especially for third picks and stuff like that.
Second that, especially on the third picks, because on the third picks, generally, you're not looking for a third scoring bot. You're looking for who can go play defense, and you want to look for somebody who can understand the game. So on this game, understand, okay, this robot's going to go for the rocket. How do you defend the rocket? Versus just go and hit them a whole bunch of times. Knowing the timing of when to hit, and being able, if they don't know it, having played a match with them before or seen them play matches where they've done it, and then being able to talk to them and say, hey, here's how you play this. Here's how you play defense against this team, because we've seen them play defense against it. And getting teams that are able to, and drive teams especially, that are able to take that kind of coaching is really great in a third pick.
I think all three of us share this sentiment where we really trust our scouting teams to form the bulk of our pick lists. So I don't believe that the drive team and the drive coach should be the sole yes or no call on every pick, because that's just too much to handle for 3 people, 4 people. So
Sorry, but on that, I also think that drive team's very biased, and I'm actually of like I personally believe that drive team should not really have too much say in the pick list, and like shouldn't really be part of that until like these tiebreakers, and like if there's someone that you really enjoyed working with. But other than that, I think drive team's too biased to work on the pick list.
Particularly because the scouting discussions have a tendency to run really, really late, and your drive team should probably get some sleep for the next day of competition.
last thought, I know we're trying to move on, but while there is some inherent bias, I do think that behind the glass perspective is something that your drive team should bring to the table, even if it's only for tiebreakers. So.
Agreed. We have had some teams that were moved lower or higher on our pick lists because of, hey, we played with them and they were fantastic to work with, or they weren't as fantastic to work with, and it just happens. So, great question, though.
Thank you. So I have this question, got sent to me like 4 different times by 4 different people, so I'll ask it. They ask, what's the best match you've ever brought from being a near disaster? What happened, why, and how did you actually recover?
4 people asked the exact question?
Well, like, basically.
I mean, I know Jeremy and I have had a lot of pretty disastrous matches.
I'm trying to think. I think everyone just wants story time right now.
I think for us, one of the big ones has been, let's see, so semifinals on, I don't remember which field we were on at Houston last year. Semifinals on our field last year.
Hopper.
Well, this year, no, last year. This year is that's a different story. Semifinals on our field last year, we won our first match pretty convincingly, and then we lost our second match pretty convincingly. And to us, that's a disaster, because it's rubber meets the road, Einstein or bust. How do you win the third one? What did they change that then beat us? And it was really stressful. The same exact thing happened to us this year in finals on our field. We won the first one pretty convincingly. We lost the second one pretty convincingly. And come into the third one and win and how do we change our strategy? And we did. We changed our strategy between those 2 matches to win the third one by like 3 points.
What changed?
Oh, shoot. We changed the robot that we played defense on, I think, was the change. I'd have to ask our scouting mentor later. But I'm pretty sure it was we changed which robot we played defense on, because prior to a match, you may think that one robot, and 5012 is a really good example of this, you may think that prior to a match that one robot is the right robot to play defense on. At Idaho, we did that. We played defense on Millennium, so we lost the Idaho Regional in finals to Millennium Falcons and Griffin Gear, because we thought the Millennium Falcons was the best robot on that alliance. Griffin Gear grew so much over the course of those elims that they came in and just wiped the floor with us, because we just weren't ready for that level of competition from the opponents, and we didn't prepare for it, and we didn't strategize for it as well as maybe we could have. I know that's not quite the story they were looking for, but that's what I got.
It's good.
So I don't qualify. I don't really have a lot of stories that qualify for bringing it back from disaster, but I feel like my bread and butter personally is making the best of a disaster. So going back to the snack analogy, I haven't told this to too many people publicly, but we drove pretty much the entire field, maybe a total of 70 feet linear, while only one face of our robot was covered in bumper. And it was maybe 20 seconds from when it happened to being disabled. So we had a lot of time to do a lot of things. So what I told my driver to do then was park under the rope so that once the rope deploys, we're this big 3-robot wide atrocity of a penalty sponge, so that we're effectively creating a better choke point on the field. And I feel like I like creating those opportunities to turn bad things into slightly less bad things, or bad things with maybe some good outcomes.
Yeah, and
They didn't, but it was something we did. Otherwise, like we were disabled 5 seconds later. So
in first, the matches, I mean, and a lot of people have said this now, the matches are so short that recovering from disaster in a match is really, really hard. Once you get behind, catching back up is incredibly challenging, and it's more about recovering for the next match, in my experience.
So I kind of agree with that. So I think most of our disasters don't really, I mean, we have a lot of disasters on field for sure, but a lot of them happen off field, right? In picking, in line selection, and like, you know, when robots break. And I think some of our, you know, better stories come from, I guess this is more of a strategy thing, right? So a lot of this is kind of like going off the, you know, a different path. But when a lot of teams play like the 254s of the world, or the 2122s of the world, or like, you know, the 2056s of the world, they try to do something different than their bread and butter, and that always fails, right? I think that this is something that a lot of teams, they just try to like, they're like, okay, we're going to be against the poofs. We got to change everything. We got to do something different. And I think that, I mean, so we've tried to do a couple of upsets, and we've been successful at a couple of them, right? I think Newton 2016 and a couple events, and it's because we stuck with our bread and butter, right? We knew we were good at shooting, but nothing else, so we just did that, and it worked well, right? So I stick with what you know you can do well, and you know, don't be afraid of changing things up, like you mentioned, right? But don't change things just for the sake of change, right?
Agreed, and I have a couple examples of that. So in 2012 at the Spokane Regional, we ranked first and picked Skunkworks second. They were also a fantastic shooter that year. And through our quarterfinals and semifinals, semifinals was really close. We nearly lost there. We ran 2 offensive bots and basically our third bot sat on the side because they couldn't cross. We picked them for different reasons. And in that last match, we sent Skunkworks, arguably the second best shooter at the regional, if not the best. They were better than us in some ways, to go play defense on the opponents. They didn't expect it, and so they weren't prepared for this really aggressive, high-powered drivetrain to come over and play defense. The second example is the last match of the day today. If you listen to some of the pre-match talks, they were talking about us going playing offense against 3309's offense, and we decided prior to the match that we were going to go play defense. And I mentioned earlier as a result of the angles or the drive positions, and I'm pretty sure 3309 didn't expect us to come play defense. And it's that sometimes that unexpected, when your strategy says that your bread and butter will not win it, you play to win. You figure out what do you have to change to win it. And I do agree that if your bread and butter wins it, use your bread and butter. Do not change for the sake of change. But you definitely have to be willing to play a role that you weren't willing to play before.
I think that last part is very, you know, don't just have a mindset, okay, my robot just plays offense, or my robot just plays defense, or something in the middle. You know, like, be flexible. But I think on that part, right, for you guys, I think you verify everything with your scouting data, right? So you know something's going to happen because your scouting says it's going to happen. But I feel like a lot of teams, right, especially like newer teams or teams that are like just getting onto the competitive scene in terms of like getting to eliminations, they kind of just freak out when they see the top level teams. And they just don't, it's hard to get, you know, the right scouting data or the best scouting data. So they just kind of flip everything. And I've definitely seen it a lot, like against us. And, you know, yeah. That's just it. It's like a weird aside.
I agree. And I've seen it before, and I've seen us do it before, which is, oh no, we're playing against the 148s, the 118s, and this was before we reached the level where we'd hit Einstein ever before. You hit these teams, and you're like, oh my God, they're legends. how do you play against a legend like that? And you just you play what you have. Occasionally throw in a little twist. Go send the other robot to go play defense they're not expecting, but play with what you have outside of what your robots are capable of. Or if you have a mechanism that is really, really iffy, don't just assume it's gonna work in the match for you to win, because if mechanisms are iffy, they're iffy for a reason.
All right, awesome. We're going to do one more question from online and then one more question from the audience. We're going to try to lightning round it because we have a couple minutes left. So our wonderful volunteer coordinator, Jared, asks, under what conditions, if any, will you miss a match?
I can honestly say that I think we have missed one match in the 10 years I've been with the team, and it was because we were swapping out a drive transmission with a fairly close turnaround, and we just didn't make it out in time. Missing a match is, well, especially given the fact that you don't really need to miss a match, you should send out a representative. And if you're going to miss a match, you definitely need to tell your alliance as absolutely soon as you can. Or before you're going to miss the match, just say, we think we might not make it.
So at Boise this year, we had this, we were presented with the opportunity that we had to miss a match or field a broken robot. And we assessed the situation and we realized that if by fielding a broken robot and trying to play a game with that robot, we would be worse off after the match, then we need to pull our robot off the field. Obviously, we'd send our human player and our coach out to get the FTA credit for the RP and everything, but if we knew that we were losing time or we would be at a net loss at the end of the match if we went to the field with a broken robot, then we needed to pull it off. And in that case, we were also repairing one of our drive transmissions. We were awaiting some replacement parts. Luckily, there was another local team nearby. Big shouts out to them. But like you should, when anything else happens in the match, you should update your alliance partners, make sure that they know what's going on, and be open to help if they're willing to provide it. I know that our alliance partners for that one match were very, very, they're really nice to us, and they were trying their best to help us out, but the truth of the matter is we didn't have the part we needed in hand to get on the field. And they understood that, and as long as you communicate with that with your partners, it's really valuable. That being said, I've had recurring nightmares of missing matches for at least 8 years now.
Me too.
I've lived that nightmare. I was going to initially decline to comment, but we missed our last match. Our last official match of the season because our climber broke in a significant way, and we thought that the only way we could win that next match was if we had the climber, and we ended up taking a little too long with the field timeout, and we rolled up to the gates, and the gates were closed. So that's on us, right? We should have paid attention to the clock better. I think that's the only match we've ever missed.
You want to say something? Our FTA has a comment.
I was the FTA. I had to actually close the gates on them, but they were amazingly graceful about it. So I'm so sorry.
I mean, it's like I said earlier. It happens, right? Whatever. It happens. You know, it's like we should have been better at managing the clock, right? It happens.
One thing I really love about being a drive coach is creating all this history with all these different teams. We've been referencing each other all panel long, so it's really an opportunity for your entire drive team to go out, network, and make friends with all these other teams, because these are some really valuable connections that you can make here.
Awesome. If anyone has a quick question, we can go ahead and ask. Does anyone have a quick question? Yes, come on down. You're good. Here you go.
What do you think are the most important qualities for a drive coach, or what skills should a prospective drive coach focus on trying to learn?
They should listen to other people. They shouldn't be think that they know everything in the world and just stick straight ahead in the course. Listen to their scouts, listen to their mentors, listen to other teams.
Agreed. Your scouts watch more matches than your drive coach does. because your scouts are sitting up there watching every single match, whereas your drive coach watches the matches that they're on and then generally is back with the robot in the really quick short turnarounds that you have between matches. Listening to your scouts' data, and then absolutely being willing to, and we mentioned it before, being willing to listen to the other robots on your lines and communicating with them. That's critical to a drive coach.
I think it's really important for the drive coach to have a really good sense of how the entire game is going, not just their robot. So having tunnel vision on your one robot is, you'll get by, but it's really important that, really important for a top tier drive coach to be aware of how all three robots are doing with regards to the match strategy. Other than that, I think it's really important for a drive coach to be loud when they need to be. I've been known to scream a lot behind the glass. That doesn't just mean loud as in your voice, but you're communicating the point across to all of your partners without having to repeat yourself.
Clearly and
yeah.
Rob. Yeah.
And you're just being very clear about all of your communications on the field.
And another something to that. I guess it depends from team to team, and a lot of teams have student drive coaches and mentor drive coaches, but all the drivers are students, right? I think a big thing is helping emotionally manage the students and the drivers, and helping them through this, and because it can be rough and stressful, and just providing that perspective that everything's going to be fine at the end of the day, and just get them in the right headspace, and just go with it.
He mentioned it there, and I feel like there would have been a lot more discussion on this, but I don't personally believe that there's an inherent better choice between a student and a mentor drive coach. It really depends on your team, your drive team, and how you want to run your team and your goals. And if you think that a student drive coach it better aligns with your team's goals, then go for it. I've seen really great student drive coaches, like the student drive coach from 696 in 2014. He was really good.
Who happens to be the Code Orange drive coach now.
Oh, yes.
195, right? They have student drive coaches, and they
rock it. They're so good.
They're one of the best teams in the world, and a lot of teams have student drive coaches.
So just having a mentor back there isn't necessarily going to give you a heads up on the rest of the competition. So you're really picking a person for this role. And if a student is your number one choice, then go for it.
All right, awesome. And with that, we are out of time. Thank you guys so much for joining this panel on Drive Team and in-match strategy. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 8 a.m. Thank you, guys.